In my eyes, it does bring about a concern on like distribution of wealth and the concentration of income. Like, how do you think about like really like wealth inequality over the next few years and the dangers of it actually concentrating wealth further into the hands of fewer?
Yeah. I mean, now we're sort of getting into politics. So I think it's the role of the private markets in order to drive innovation forward, and it's the role of government in order to encode the values of a population into its laws. So I think those are the forces that exist in tension, and I think the network effects and the power laws that we're all chasing definitely create those dynamics when it comes to wealth. But it's not a new problem. You look at railroads or telecommunications or whaling. It's been around for forever.
Final one on this. How do you think about like regulation? I'm concerned about the asymmetry of knowledge between private and public. We're very fortunate to spend time with some of the most brilliant entrepreneurs in the world. And then you go and speak to, regulatory bodies, which, bluntly just don't have the same level of information and knowledge, and they're setting the regulation. It's concerning. How do you think about that chasm of knowledge between those two bodies and where it means we'll shake out from a regulatory standpoint?
Yeah, I think this is a longer conversation. I think regulation on the whole it benefits incumbents because the cost of adhering to regulations are significant. You take a look at, in the mid-90s, you could have 25 million in revenue and go public. Today, if you have 100 million in revenue, it costs you $15 million in your first year to go public. And that's just a byproduct of regulation. So regulation benefits the winners or the bigger companies. I think the second thing is a lot of the times when regulation is imposed, people don't anticipate the second order effects. You look at real estate prices in California as they're 3 to 4 times what they are in the rest of the country because of the law that was passed in the 1970s called Prop 13. There are all these sort of like second and third order effects that a lot of regulation doesn't anticipate, and the legal process doesn't move fast enough. In most of the cases, you look at crypto, right? It's taken the US government, 10 years to kind of catch up to what's going on. And now with Operation Choke Point, they're starting to really regulate that ecosystem, and they've finally gotten around to it. So I think the system, and maybe I'll indulge in another example. Like if you think about airplanes, post World War II airplanes, people flew. We were just invented the jet engine, and the commercial airlining business was growing, but it was still really risky. But the FAA put a bunch of regulations around planes, and we kept flying planes. And then one day we realized that planes with square windows crash more because they create stress fractures along the points of the squares. And so we regulated that out. So I think what does that teach you? We don't know what we don't know. And so the best path to regulation is incremental. When we identify that there's something wrong, will bad things happen along the way? Yes, there's no doubt. But that's sort of and this might sound callous, but that's the path at the price of progress.
Final one. You mentioned kind of it sometimes benefiting larger companies and incumbents. This is my also big question, which is like startups versus incumbents. Alex Rampell of Andreessen says a brilliant one, which is like, will the incumbent acquire innovation before the startup acquires distribution? When we look at kind of the two ends of the spectrum for the next generation of AI and LLMs, which is like, will existing incumbents integrate it well enough into their distribution channels to be highly effective and continue their dominance? Or actually are startups with agility, flexible code bases, much better place to win in this next generation? How do you think about that kind of startup versus incumbent mega war?
Yeah, so my thinking's evolved here. In the beginning, I thought the incumbents were going to win the whole thing. And I thought that because the incumbents have far greater distribution. Microsoft has an incredible channel. Microsoft has a special relationship with OpenAI. The pace with which Microsoft is injecting its products with LLMs is astounding, right? And so startups are in this unusual position where they have negative time to launch. They're actually behind the market, which is unusual. I mean, think about mobile apps and the launch of the Apple Store. Startups were the first ones to understand how to write mobile apps with Objective-C. But I think anytime we talk about machine learning, there's always this question around like, what is the moat? And I have this reaction, which is like, it's a data moat. And I think the answer is the one that it's always been, which is better execution is the moat. If you can build a better CRM and get it into market, you can win, right? You take a look at what Notion has done with documents or what Snowflake did with databases facing two big incumbents. Like there are these stories. They're all over. They sort of create this beautiful constellation within Startup Land of the David versus Goliath story. And I think if you're a venture capitalist or if you're a startup founder, you have to believe that. I think it's in your fabric that no matter how big the incumbent is or the advantages that they have, that if you have really great execution, you can still win, and you can win big.